Welcome to Fitness and Consciousness. I am your host, Ryan Hadley, and my guest today is Sam Blandina. He's a CHEK 2 practitioner and a CHEK 1 lifestyle coach. He was a yoga teacher, Pilates teacher, and the list goes on and on. So thanks for being on the show, Sam.
Thank you, Ron, for having me.
So what is a CHEK practitioner?
Well, just the CHEK practitioner, it's kind of an acronym. It's actually off of Paul Chek's name, the founder of the CHEK Institute. Corrective High Performance Exercise Kinesiology is what it used to stand for. Now it's Corrective Holistic Exercise Kinesiology. Given the fact that things have changed at the Institute over the years, it's been in existence for about 25 years now, I believe, since 1994. And they founded the Institute, or Paul CHEK founded the Institute on principles of wholeness or holistic health, not just like I want to get big, I want to get strong, but looking at the body and the spirit, the chemical, the physical, and the spiritual body, basically. They call that the triad of health. You know, you've got the higher mind, which is at the top. If you think of a pyramid, that's considered a triad of health. That's the height of it. Then you have the physical and the chemical body. So basically that's what we look at. We look at more of a holistic approach to, assessing people, evaluating people at these levels. And, depending on how deeply people are willing to go into that, we try to help them and guide them and coach them toward living in a way that's much more whole and healthy.
Yeah, I came to know of Paul CHEK from a Pavel Tsatsouline book, who I'm certified by. And so I've read at least one of his books, and he had this, like you said, more of a holistic approach. So how did you find out about him, and why did you want that certification over whatever other certification?
That's a very, very good question. I started as a personal trainer in 2000. I'd gotten an ACE trainer certification in 1999, and I was working at a local place, the Jewish Community Center here in Indianapolis. And I was there for about 4 to 5 years, till about 2004. And, I was viewed, and me and one of the other guys, they were like, the two best trainers at the JCC. And I went in 2001, right after September 11th. There was a fitness conference down in Florida, in Fort Lauderdale. And one of the trainers there, this other guy that was, me and him were allegedly the best trainers at the JCC. He encouraged me to come down to this fitness conference. And I said, okay. So I decided to go. It was about 2 or 3 weeks after September, I think. So it was late September. And I went with him. And he said, whatever you do, man, sign up for this crazy-looking bald guy, this Paul CHEK dude, man. He says, I've listened to his lectures a couple of times. He's kind of nutty. But, man, he seems to really know what he's talking about. So whatever you do, sign up for everything. I never even heard of him. Sign up for everything you can with him. So I signed up for 2 lectures, because you can do it previous and register previously. This was a while ago, 2001, so I did most of the stuff on paper, not quite as online and virtual as the things you can do today. Anyway, I registered and went down there. And the first seminar we went to was called How to Flatten Your Abs, Secrets of Training Women. How to Flatten Your Abs Forever. I'm like, oh, wow, we're going to learn all these new cool, ab exercises. Walked in there, and this little guy up there, this really muscular little guy, Paul CHEK, he starts talking, and me and my friend, JC, this trainer I was with, he had gotten there really early and was holding the place in line for us. He says, we want to get right in the front. And we literally got right in front. So we were in the very, very first row. And so he's standing right in front of us. And he starts talking about women's anatomy. He starts talking about how women are equal but not the same to men. There's actually a course by the CHEK Institute called Equal but Not the Same. I'd recommend that to any trainer, anybody, because it teaches you how women are, yes, the same as men, but we are very different anatomically in many, many ways. There's no really equality here or there. We are equal in the eyes of the highest, if you will. But when it comes down here on the earth, like you can do things that I can't do, right? I can probably do a few things you can't, whatever.
Right.
You have knowledge above me. Others have knowledge above me. It's not like we're equal in that. And there's the physical differences and there's anatomical differences. So just explaining those anatomical female differences and how important it was to understand those, and then understand how important it was to be able to even evaluate the gut function and to test the gut to see if it's working properly. How to, look after women when they're in the time of the month, which is virtually ignored in training today.
Taboo to even ask.
And, most of the women I train today are past that, if you will. But, if anybody comes in that's not, it's like that's definitely a consideration. And, that's kind of ignored overall, just overall. I think most even women trainers aren't even aware of how important that is to understand what's going on with a woman when they're on their time of the month. Anyway, the anatomical differences, fast twitch muscle fiber differences, all these different things to understand. The lack of muscle mass in a woman's neck is like 40% less than a man. Just understanding things like this and understanding how women can be prone to more type of injuries because of these anatomical differences. So you want to be careful with them. You know what I mean? How do you train them? How do you build a foundation? And that goes for anybody, in my opinion, of building a foundation of the primal movements, what we're talking about. We're talking about pushing, pulling, squatting, lunging, any gait-related type of things. Those are all primal movements. And, when we learn to posture, breathing, when we learn to master those type of things initially, especially if we're unfamiliar with them, you can go all kinds of different places. But I really, really recommend that people master these primal movements with their body weight first before they move ahead. And you can ascend or descend them. That's another great element of being a CHEK practitioner. They really teach you practically how to understand how to descend or ascend and how to look at people and how to look at their movement and understand what's going on and understand where their deficits are. And there's a lot of tests that we're asked to do and different things of that nature. That allow us to get a lot of data so we can design programs that make sense for people.
Yeah, and he has more of a clinical background, right? Was he a physical therapist, or not a physical therapist, a
neuromuscular therapist?
Yeah, okay. And then so he was kind of like taking more of something from more of a clinical setting, because there's like this gap between the personal trainer and the physical therapist, and it seems like he was like trying to bridge some of that gap with his, like he's trying to teach personal trainers not medical stuff, but more towards that, like bridging the gap more. Is that like part of what he was trying to do?
Yes, that is true. Paul actually started in a clinical setting, working in doctor's offices with orthopedic surgeons and what have you. And his approach was really, really different. And a lot of the people he worked for didn't agree with it, from what I understand anyway. And the reason why there was a gap there, if you will. And he wanted to be able to take this understanding and integrate it. And so he left that and he went out to do exactly what you're talking about, to try to bring that element out into understanding where we really, really understand movement better, and we are looking at people from a corrective standpoint if we have to, to help them to get in a position, if they want to be really, really good athletes or just really healthy and whatever, we want to understand how to help them get there. And that's what Paul really wanted to teach us. And if there's corrective exercises necessary or physical therapy type exercises, they were available to us because we're taught them to some degree. Even though I am not a licensed physical therapist, I've done a lot of advanced physical therapy with people, and I'm not calling myself one because I can get in trouble for saying that.
Right.
But I have done a lot of advanced type of physical therapy because my background is a CHEK practitioner. And I'm actually qualified in some ways more than your basic physical therapist that comes out of school.
Yeah, I think there is he does teach a lot of good things, and I've read just some of what he's done and learned from you, and I really like that approach that's just more than just performance, but like where to start before that. So it's it has that performance. So when a client comes to you for the first time, you don't know anything about them. You're just getting to know this person. What do you do? What does that first session look like?
It's a good question. Usually I don't even charge for the first sit down I have with people because I just want them to get to know who I am and I want to get to know who they are. So we basically have an interview, and I ask them some questions and listen to who they are, try to listen to really who they are and look and see who they are. And, ask them basic questions like, why are you here? Do you have any injuries? Do you have any past? What's your exercise history? How's your energy? How are you eating? How do you sleep at night? Just getting a basic sense of where they are with health. How consistent they are in their exercise. How much time a week, if we were to work together, do they have to dedicate to, if I were to design programs for them, how much time they would have to dedicate to that. How much support they have, what's available to them. All these different things come into play. And if they agree that they want to go ahead with me, we go ahead and do basically a musculoskeletal evaluation, a movement pattern analysis. We do if we move into the lifestyle coaching aspect, we always try to look at the diet and understand their metabolic typing and address any, allergy issues, because there's a ton of those out there today. You have a bunch of food allergies and people may be this intolerant or that intolerant. So trying to help figure things out like that and design helping them to understand how they want to live their life and design their movements and their dietary needs and their spiritual needs around what's true and what's right for them.
Yeah, you keep bringing up the higher, the spiritual, the along with just the they want to pick up heavier weights, and so I think part of this maybe it's not exactly new, but it seems like there is this movement of consciousness, and that there's some people like him that seem to be on this. They've been talking about it for a while. And that's part of how the show got the name, Fitness and Consciousness, because it's not just about, we can talk about sets and reps and exercise selection, but and that's really good too. But you keep talking about the spiritual and the higher. So what does that have to do with lifting a weight?
What that has to do with lifting a weight is everything to do with lifting a weight, because you can't perform well if you have not connected. And the more connected you are in that part, and the more truth you understand, and the more you embrace that, the more other areas of your life will open up, and then you'll be better and better. That's part of that. Part of that higher is seeking who you truly are and what your gift truly is too. If we just sit back and we don't do our work, if you will, and we don't pay attention to what our gift is, and we get lazy and we sit back, we're not really honoring what has been given to us by the highest. So that way we access that highest. And when we speak about that, sometimes that's people become very, very defensive about faith-based stuff. So I have to be careful how I word things in front of people, but what I do is reflect what I believe. And that, to me, is the most important thing that you do. I'm not here to change anybody, but I am here to reflect something really, really big. And if they choose to make the changes on their own in the way that's appropriate for them, that's part of what I am here to coach them for, because I'm not going to do it for them any more than anybody does it for me. We get information from people. We get inspiration from people. We get lifted up by people. We hear, think, read, imitate, whatever. But it comes down to us taking the helm and taking control of our health, taking control of our gift, and delving into it. It's easy to say that when we live comfortably. Some people in the world, maybe in other parts of the world, wouldn't even have the conscious level to think as we're thinking and speaking right now.
They don't have time.
They don't have time. It's never even occurred to them to think this way, because that's a part of the luxury, if you will, that we have living the way we do as in the West, if you will.
Yeah, the spiritual approach to it, and I asked my jiu-jitsu teacher a long time ago, and he's in his late 60s, early 70s, something like that. And I asked him, what's the difference between the spirit and the soul? And he said, well, your spirit, he equated that to your fighting spirit. And, and then the soul was this religious thing. And so, when I'm doing, what we're doing, the martial arts, the Zen, and what I've found is in the kettlebell lifting, the or even like a single deadlift, a max deadlift, that you are kind of developing that spirit, and that there is this. It's almost easier to get into that flow state, that Zen state, if like you're doing a snatch test where you have to do 100 snatches in 5 minutes with a 53-pound kettlebell. You're not thinking about your credit cards or your did you leave the oven on or something like that. It is nothing but what is going on in that moment. So that developing the spirit and accessing that like consciously instead of it happening almost on accident, it seems to make a lot of sense. And so it's really cool that he, as somebody that certifies people, has that in the forefront. And so you were also a yoga teacher. So how did you get into yoga in the first place, and what made you stray away from teaching it more? I know you still practice it, but like what's that all about for you?
I never had intended. I really didn't even really know what yoga really meant. Back in the day, due to some, probably, back in 1998, 97, I had already heard somebody say, "Hey man, you're really flexible," to me like years ago, and you should like do some of this yoga poses or something. That was like way, way long ago. And I never thought of it that way, never thought about it that way. And then when somebody showed me a little bit of yoga, and I realized that I was really kind of developing this yoga routine on my own that I was doing, because I had some emotional pain, and I felt that this was a place that I found all of a sudden that I was going to and doing all these movements, and they were calming for me, and they felt really good. So I think I went to it toward by nature. I didn't really understand it. In all reality, did not really understand it as doing yoga. But I realized later when somebody said, "Hey, I want you to go to this yoga class with me," that it was basically a lot of the same stuff. So like, okay. And so what happened is when I practiced, and when I came into being a personal trainer, I never had entertained being a yoga instructor ever. But the club I was working at, the Jewish Community Center, decided they had just added about 4 years previously. They had 4 or 5 years previously. They had added a huge 10,000 square foot, beautiful fitness center, and they had a beautiful room for classes. And they weren't, yoga was getting real popular, and they did not have a yoga teacher. So they were like, "We're going to get one. We need to get one." I said, "Well, I've been practicing something like yoga for years now, a few years now." And they're like, "Well, we can't really call it yoga because, you're not certified." So I started teaching this class, and I think they called it functional flexibility or something like that. I can't remember. And that was the first yoga class. I'm not going to make the claim that I brought yoga to the JCC, but I was the first teacher in the fitness center at the Jewish Community Center. And I took not too long after that, I took a weekend yoga certification from Yoga Fit International, which is really good, incidentally, even though it was only like, I can't remember, like 20 hours or something like that or whatever. But I learned a lot from that, and then I taught for almost 12 years, and I taught like 15 or 1,600 classes and hours, and I didn't really take any teacher training, but I learned by the nature of doing and listening, and I went to workshops for some very, very fine Iyengar teachers. Aaron Fleming, excellent Iyengar teacher. I've been to several of his workshops.
I think I went to one of his.
And that's more post me retiring from teaching yoga. I quit teaching in about 2011 because I had quit practicing. I was hating teaching yoga anymore. I taught, a bunch and all over different places. I won't go into that. But this last place I was teaching was LA Fitness, and I was teaching at 8 o'clock at night till 9 o'clock on Tuesday night. And it was just this horrible time to teach, and I'd get all nervous and jacked up because there was a lot of expectation, from the class, because I taught this power yoga, blah, blah, and all this other stuff, and it was one of the best attended classes there, and, so I felt pressured to perform, and I realized over the course of teaching there for like however many years I taught her, like a couple, 3, it was like, man, I don't even enjoy this anymore. I kind of hate doing this, and I hate teaching the class. And, it would be 9 o'clock at night finishing up, and I'd have to get up early the next day. So I just got to the point where I'm done. I'm done teaching, and I went back. It felt like a huge load was lifted off me when I quit. I won't say I quit, I just went back. I was no longer practicing on my own, and I had given up for a lot of different reasons practicing on my own. And I said, this is not right. I started with this naturally, and I want to go back into it and make it an element of my life instead of like, I'm sick of this stuff. So I think a lot of that, people go through that. I think there's a lot of people that have come on and wanted to be yoga teachers because they've been inspired by taking it or experiencing it. And I don't think there's a lot of purity in it. A lot of it has been damaged. A lot of yoga has been damaged and commercialized, like a lot of things have been. And that's one of the reasons why I moved out of it too, because I don't claim to be a yogi or some guru. I really don't at all. And there's just there's a billion yoga teachers out there these days, and I'm not saying that's bad. Yoga's a great thing. I love it. I love practicing it. But it's more comes from my heart now than it ever has. Even the experience of learning it and finding out about, my skills, and I was really good as a teacher, blah, or so they said, was that, what really matters now is how I feel about it now. It's a much deeper connection, and it's certainly a much more higher level of understanding where my spirit is with it, and my soul, and my body, my physical body, and my breathing too with it. There's a much higher level of understanding now because I practice.
Yeah, that makes sense. And was part of what you didn't like the class that you were teaching at you said LA Fitness, right?
Yes.
Was it because people are going there expecting the yoga, almost like some of yoga is almost like a caricature of itself. It's like, the real yoga is good, but some of these classes you go to and it's about who has the tightest pants or who has the it's like this, it's like a show. And so it was like that part of it, was it like the students were not like.
Well, that's a really, really good question and answer to that. I'm sure that what you said, there's those elements that have come up in any number of yoga classes, okay? I've actually had somebody at the beginning of class or toward the middle of it or whatever actually said, "This is a horrible, worst class I've ever taken," and say that, shouted it out loud and stormed out of the class. I think the whole class was kind of stunned. I sure was. But, everybody's like, "Hey, man, you're really okay. I don't know what that woman was all about." It's like, "Hey, man, I don't really know." So I can't really say I really, really know. But overall, I had some really, really dedicated students that came into that class that I really didn't like taking, and they really, really, really enjoyed it. And it was a very well-attended class. But people walk in the door that you don't even know. They come in with all these physical problems. "Oh, I heard about yoga, and I would like to try it." I'm like, "Well, we do we kind of work at an advanced level here because it's like a power yoga class, but we can make everything work for you, and you need to make sure that you understand that." But I have to go through the same spiel every night almost, because whether there were people there that were familiar with the format or not, and some people walked in with physical problems that I'm like, I just got done having spinal surgery, or I just had a bunch of stuff done on my wrist. I'm like, we're going to talk about doing a lot of stuff and hand balances and putting your hands on the floor a lot. Like, what do you say to that? Then I got to spend time trying to help this person understand. Maybe we should go get this ball and have you put your hands on this ball and or a chair or something. And that's part of what I needed to do as a professional. And not ignore that, because my background as a practitioner, CHEK practitioner, makes me understand that you got to make sure these people are not forcing themselves. And of course, many people do. And there is that element of look at me, look at me, look at me. That was part of the element that brought me into it a little bit more, because when I started as a teacher and people were like, "Oh man, you're really good. You're really good." Then it got pumped my ego up, man. It validated me from some, invalid times back in the past. And boy, that kind of inflated me a lot. And then it made it more about me than it did about me, what I was teaching. So really, what you said was I was that guy too. I was that guy that it was all about me and blah, 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 and all this stuff, and how, I'd get around to people and, what have you, and when I could and what have you. But I learned later that it was more about trying to take care of people in the class. But now, post all that, I'm really glad I don't teach anymore, because there's a lot of great teachers out there. There's a lot available, and I feel really, really lucky that I garnered this great wisdom. I would call it yoga wisdom, if you will, or yogic wisdom. And now I don't have to go to anybody or run to a class. Right here in my living room, I can do whatever I want.
Yeah, I think like when there's like if you ask somebody like what yoga is, you can like somebody might start like listing different asanas and techniques and stuff or breathing methods, but somebody else might say like bhakti yoga, like more of a devotional or karma, and you're doing it like your acts. And it's like what's yoga? Well, depends who you ask, and probably depends on what part of the day you're asking them. And so I think that even like what you're doing, like so you're certified by Paul CHEK, and then you're teaching these people different things. And I know you go over breathing and posture, and if you start talking about breathing and posture, it sounds like yoga, and then Paul CHEK. So is that yoga too? I think in some ways that it can be, and the spiritual practice of doing something with your spiritual vehicle, your body. This, so the like what you're doing as a Paul CHEK practitioner is no less spiritual than what they're doing at the yoga studio with using just their body weight in these different techniques. So do you kind of see it that way also? Or?
Yes, I do see it that way, because really when you look at all of it, it all really comes together. No matter what you're doing, however you're moving, all these things, these principles of posture and breathing and stabilization, they really apply to all movements. I don't care whether it's slinging a kettlebell or doing some yoga. All the principles can interrelate, because they're all important for all of that. So there is that deeper spiritual aspect too that's really, really important. And you mentioned that, going into like the gym to do your max deadlift or whatever you're going to go do, how you put yourself in this position of really focusing on what you're doing. And knowing that you've done the work to build a foundation to be able to do that as part of that. To be able to, and the discipline that comes from building that foundation, and the discipline of practicing, going into practice your spiritual disciplines on a regular basis, and you become more and more disciplined and are able to access that spiritual mind, not just in times of repose or prayer or meditation, but in the physicality of getting ready to do a max deadlift too. You can bring that strength and serenity into that movement. And it's so powerful. And it brings peace, because it's true. And the truer it is, the more peaceful we are. Even in the most powerful and explosive movements, there can be peace.
Yeah, that's true. And I noticed like when you've been on vacations and stuff, and you asked me to fill in with your clients, and I noticed they all moved really well, and they had so like if you could call yoga something like you put yourself in these different positions and you're able to breathe in those positions. So, and then if you want to kind of get like better at yoga, which is maybe not the right way to put it, but you know what I mean, then you get like better at putting at these more difficult positions. Whether you're like in, it could be like a life position. Maybe you're like confronted with a lot of stress at work, and you're able to, so you're in that position, and instead of like tensing up and you're just gritting and you can't breathe and your breath shallows and your heart rate skyrockets, you're able to like breathe in that position. So you're getting better at yoga, but you're just at some corporate job under a lot of pressure. So, but anyways, I was saying that like your clients, even though they're not doing like these traditional yoga techniques, seem to have all of these elements that somebody would want to build in a yoga class, with the posture, the breathing, the movement, and like this functional, and it's like spiritual, whatever that means to them at the same time. So I was impressed with what I saw, and you're talking about these. Like kind of like what yoga was looking like, and what we look, how we it's like this paradox of like, you want to be a yoga teacher, that's great, and then you start to be a yoga teacher, and it's like, so you think you're good enough to be a yoga teacher? So it's like you have to say yes, but you got to get rid of that ego that says you're so good. So it's like this paradox of all around. So I guess what I'm getting around to is like, what is like more like the connection there, or what's next? Is that how you, like, were you looking at it like that before, as you're putting these people in these increasingly difficult positions, even though they're not doing like yoga techniques, or like what is the goal of as a CHEK practitioner with your clients? I know it depends on the client, but I think you know what I'm saying, right?
I do know what you're saying. Well, going back to the integration of all these great techniques and all, when you are skilled enough and I'm going to say lucky enough and blessed enough and graced enough to be able to expose to be good information and really high quality training, it enables you to teach people at that level. So, or to bring that in more. And everybody's different. Some people are better at it. Some people it takes a lot more time of practice and in practice to be able to access that. So, we all at different levels of this accessing our gifts. And some of us may be real quick at learning. Some of us may be a little slower at it, depending on we're stronger and weaker in certain areas. But what I've just tried to stress with my clients is just paying attention. We're building a foundation here. And as we go forward, the majority of them have gotten better movement patterns as they have gone ahead and aged. So there's all these elements of there's such a unique personality in each person, and you have to learn not to be a fake or a chameleon, but you have to meet people where they are. And that means in a lot of different ways. And so not everybody's going to be compliant with exactly the way you would like to see things done or whatever. Or do I have the exact correct formula for everybody? I would probably say not. That's why we solicit help from others and build a referral system. But just getting back to that focus and the attention and trying to get people to be mindful about what they're doing, there's that element in almost everything that we do. If you're driving out there, you need to be pretty mindful these days. You really do. If you're going to the gym and trying to do a max deadlift, you probably be pretty mindful. You can hurt yourself really, really badly. So this mindful element of bringing that into yourself and peace. And I actually say that to my clients because I'm asking them to really do something very demanding maybe. And I'm like, be at peace. You're strong, but you are an athlete. You've trained with me for how many years now? 20? You're an athlete. You come in here, you have the attitude of an athlete. You know what a deadlift is. You know what a kettlebell swing is. You know what a lunge is, a squat, a Swiss ball this or a Swiss ball that. You know because it's been ingrained in you for 20 years. So you got an attitude of, I'm an athlete. So your attitude when you walk in, I built a foundation. I know what I'm doing. I got a good coach standing with me too, who's watching after me. All these things come into play, man, and everybody is so unique. I'm going to use one of my clients as an example. You've trained her before. Ellen Boso was her name. She's 76 years old, and she came to me when she was 55 years old. When she was 55 years old, she came to me, and she's 76 now. She couldn't lunge. She couldn't squat. She had a 30-degree scoliotic curve in her spine. But with good chiropractic care and strength training, this woman could deadlift, squat, lunge like she couldn't when she was 56, and she now can at 76, better and better all the time. And she asks a lot of herself because she's been taught that. It's not because she's performing for me or performing for herself. She's performing for something much higher, for her health and for her spirit. And she takes it really, I use her as an example because she takes it so incredibly, she wants to be so incredibly mindful. And she's trying to learn all the time, and I get exposed to new information about her here and there, and like, oh, that's something we can work on, because now she's at a point where she can, like her breathing. She needs to work on her breathing a little bit. There's some other things we want to work on. I can't do everything. And others have helped me to understand how to work with this person too. But man, she's a fine example of what can happen when you really pay attention.
Yeah, she is impressive. She is one of the ones that, like you said, I think you said I worked with her several times, and one time when she was doing, it's like this Swiss ball pikes. I put my hand up on her stomach, and it was like a table. It was like, whoa! It was. I was not expecting. I wasn't really expecting anything, but I like went to like kind of like push up on her, kind of like spotting, but kind of like
Yeah.
And I was like, man, that is crazy. I mean, it was so hard. So what you mentioned some different movements, and like, so what are like some of the fundamental movements that you want your clients to get down? Like, where do you start, or like what's the same for everyone? Like, you have to learn these certain things.
Well, like I think most of us agree that if you can't squat, you ain't doing real well in life. And being able to do an efficient body weight squat, to learn to be able to, when you program your body correctly in all these movements over the course of time, and your motor programming is built properly, then you've built this foundation of good motor program. Then you can start picking up weights when you've built a good foundation. But that motor program is such a critical element of it right there. So, being able to do a good lunge, backward stepping lunge, multi-directional lunge, forward stepping lunge, stationary lunge. There's a billion different ways you could be doing some lunges. And there's a lot of accessories you can add to those movements too with a squat or a lunge. You can do a squat push press. You can do a frontal squat. You can do a squat one-arm press. You can do a squat military press. There's many movements that we can accessorize off these basic primal movements, but that's why we want to coach people on them. And part of the movement pattern analysis that we do with people allows us to determine where they're at with that and whether to ascend or descend a squat for them. They might do like a wall slide squat, a Swiss ball wall, or a bridge, a simple pelvic bridge, or do a Swiss ball wall slide or a squat where you're laying prone, on your back supine on the ball with your knees against the wall, and you actually drop down into a squat position. That may be a squat for some people. Some people in back rehab may be something like on a total gym, which is a good apparatus for a Pilates table. That's a closed chain exercise, and they may be able to post-surgery be able to lay on that and do leg press. I'm not real big on sit-down training at all. You know that. I'm not big on hip sleds at all, but for somebody rehabilitating, something like a Pilates table makes it a closed chain exercise. There's a big difference between open and closed chain exercise that a lot of people don't realize how important that relates to us in our functional atmosphere. But a total gym and a Pilates table are a closed chain. So they're by doing like a press, a leg press on them or whatever, that's what allows people to be able to do those movements. So that's actually a descended version of a squat because it's supported, right? But they can do it. So how do you design programs for the injury to come in? The furniture mover's got a blown out back. That's got to go back to work someday.
Yeah.
You better be able to be strong, or you haven't done your job that he has paid you for. So, given all that movement, being able to do all those basic movements allow us to accessorize. And as far as what I ask my clients to do, well, a lot of the stuff I've learned from just looking around and watching people do some stuff, and they're like, "Oh, that's a great move. I want to try that myself." And then when I have mastered it myself, it's like, I'm going to ask you to try this or a descended version of it. And once you learn how to think in that way, you can easily see how to ascend a movement or descend a movement by just adding something or taking something away or blah, 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 whatever. Or descending it or taking this, both legs instead of one. Not standing on an unstable platform, standing on the floor, whatever. You make it work for people. So that's really, really important. But as far as the variety of exercises, it's important that you try to give people, not convolute things too much, especially if you have a time slot you're working with people and there's a specific focus. Like with Elle, it's not like I'm trying to do 20 things with her in a session. It's like 5 to 8 things we work on, and we work on them really hard. I want to get her once a week. We want to really hit it. And I also have to check in with her and make sure she's okay too. What we're preparing to get ready to do. Is she up for it that day? I always check in with the people. That's a big thing. It's like, what's up today? What's going on? If your lady comes in and she's a young woman, are you on your time of the month today? Or we need to modify your program because of that, blah, 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 whatever. So I love working. Ellen's learned how to do excellent kettlebell swing. Yeah. And I have her doing a part of the Turkish get up. a little bit of that. She can't do the whole thing yet, but I'll tell you, that's one of the very difficult things to train people for, I have found. The Turkish get-up is not, and you don't bring rookies in and try to teach them Turkish get-ups, man. I've seen people do it, and they're laughing because they're so inept at doing it. It's crazy. It's like you need to build a good foundation before you try something like doing a get-up, in my opinion. You know what I mean? You may be able to get people there, but to me, I want to work on that. If I get somebody new, I want to make sure that they are mastering these primal movements so they can do stuff like a Turkish get-up, and that they're working on their mobility and doing these movements fully too. Like you squat well, you lunge well, you push, pull, twist, walk. All that stuff creates mobility in the body too. So movement really is the modality that creates better movement, if that makes any sense at all. When you squat well, and you can squat well, it's going to keep you mobile in that position. People can't squat past a few degrees. If you could squat to 90 degrees or lower and have good form, that's awesome. It's going to keep you mobile. That's why all these little squat positions you do like in yoga and stuff like that, crawling on the floor. You said something about doing a bear crawl, and you wanted to add some yoga moves to it, like a hand balance, like the crow pose. I did that the other day. I deadlifted, then I crawled on the floor and did a crow pose, and turned around, crawled back, and did a crow pose. So, it's just like, pick it up, man. So I don't write programs for myself. I basically like, what do I want? What pattern do I want to work with? What move do I want to work with that I want to continue to practice? I know how to do push-ups every day. But there's other moves that I want to make sure I'm approaching every week for me. Like I want to deadlift every week, I want to swing every week, I want to get up every week, I want to lunge every week, squat every week, step up every week. I can't do everything. I'm kind of an old man, so I can't beat my body, and I don't intend to. I don't think anybody should be beating their body. But I'm learning how to, when I'm on, I can get it pretty good, but I still have to be careful because with my ego, and competing with myself, because I'm an older man, I see things like, I can do that still. Well, so some things I can do really, really well, better than people I've seen, but there's other things I'm not that great at all because of lack of movement or whatever. So understanding that I've gone forward is like, I want to challenge myself, but I don't want to trash myself either. And that was a really important thing I learned in this past year. I had some pretty major medical issues I had to deal with, and it took me out for about 8 months. I could not do anything. I couldn't work. And at one point, I was totally non-ambulatory. I could barely even walk. So I learned what it meant to be able to say goodbye to everything and give up all the things I had done and to have others care for me. That was a real big thing. 'Cause I was always the guy that was coaching people and taking care of people. When the tables turned on me, I was very, very fortunate because grace was all around me because I had nothing. So I kind of got off track there a little bit, but that's how I kind of look at things, or I'm learning to look at things. And, there's such great moves out there. There's thousands, if not tens of thousands of great exercises out there. I don't want to run around and just have people hopping around. I want people to be focused, and I want to have a program in front of me that I've written up and thought about specifically for them. And I want to see them execute it with a good heart. And that's what I have tried to give them. And part of that is the few people I have are attracted to that truth. And I'm trying to be basically being a coach for the truth. That's about it.
Yeah, it is interesting what we attract, who we may have like a lot of different people try us out, and then we wonder why some people stick around for years and other people are, after 1 or 2 sessions, go on to someone else. But and you're right about the knowing what you can do. Like this, like just recently in the last 8 months or so was the first time where I didn't write down every single rep of every set that I was doing, because I've done some times where I would just go outside and throw the kettlebell around for a couple hours and not write everything down. But for the most part, I was following programs that I really thought about. But when I hurt my knee, I had to I was even bench press hurt my knee because the way you drive through your legs on the bench press. So it was I was just trying to figure out what I could do, and I wasn't writing stuff down. I was just kind of doing whatever I felt like. But so you were talking about open chain and closed chain exercises, and those are the purposes are misunderstood. So, do you want to dig in a little bit more into that? Like, what do they mean, first of all, and why is open chain maybe better than closed for most people, but closed chain for rehab purposes? And I know that's not black and white, but what's just give us your take on that.
Well, when we look at most human movement, when we moving across the face of the earth, that's in the lower body. That is considered a closed chain movement, because you're moving over a surface that you're not moving that surface. You're moving against it. You're using it to generate force to move forward or backward or jump, whichever. So a closed chain exercise is one where you're not overcoming a load. You're overcoming a fixed, like the earth is fixed. So a squat is a closed chain exercise. Running is a closed chain exercise. Lunging is a closed chain exercise. Deadlifting is a closed chain exercise. Stepping up is a closed chain exercises. Most of the body, the exercise that we do in the lower body, in real life, are closed chain. So when it comes to like training an athlete, like a football player, it makes sense that you would probably want to train them primarily in closed chain ways in the lower body, because that's the way we move as human beings. We get away from that when we do stuff like knee extensions, which are really dumb in all reality for your muscles, because they don't require any stabilization. The machine does a lot of the work for you. It's very isolated. It doesn't really make any sense for functional movement.
It's a weird firing pattern.
It is a very weird fire. It's opposite what it does, because you're overcoming the load. Okay, you're no longer pushing against the earth and pushing away and creating force from that, or carrying a load and pushing against the earth. Okay, that's like doing a squat, for example, doing a back or front squat. You've got a load you're carrying, and you're doing a closed chain movement. Now, if you're doing a squat press, you're doing a closed and an open chain movement. The reason why is because now you've got a weight in your hands that you're actually pushing overhead. That's different than pushing against the earth. Okay, if you're trying to get the... So let me give you an example here of when you're doing a pull-up and a lat pull down, the two differences there. One's closed chain, one's open chain. Because you're pulling yourself in a pull-up or a chin, you're pulling yourself up to a fixed object. When you're sitting down or kneeling down or standing, you're doing a lat pull down, it's the opposite. It's 180 degrees diametrically opposed because of what's happening. When you are pulling yourself and doing a pull-up, you're pulling your scapula past your humerus. When you're doing a lat pull down, because of what you're doing is you're pulling your humerus past your scapula. It's diametrically opposed. There's nothing wrong with doing closed chain exercise for the upper body, but most things that we do in real life are closed chain in the lower body and open chain in the upper body, like a pitcher in baseball, a javelin thrower, a martial artist. Is generating force mostly from the earth. That is his focal point. Really, when you think about any real movement, if we did not have the earth to push, if like in gravity, just like, you couldn't really generate any force. It'd be flailing. Okay, so the earth, when you push against that earth, that's where that closed chain power comes from. When you're doing a snatch, a kettlebell snatch, you're driving from the earth. Yeah, you're going overhead, then you're overcoming that because it's different than what you're doing in your lower body. But that's where the power is generated from that closed chain movement downstairs or in the lower part of your body. Now, a throwing athlete, closed chain lower body, he's got a ball in his hand, he releases it, it's an open chain exercise. A push-up is a closed chain exercise because you're pushing away from the earth. A dumbbell press, a bench press, laying back is not. A cable exercise, pushing a cable standing, is an open chain and closed chain in the lower body if you're standing. If you're doing like a lunge, cable push, closed chain, open chain. Tennis player, all closed chain in the lower body, open chain in the upper body. So, you think about, how do you train your athletes? You train them in that way. There's nothing wrong with doing closed chain exercises for the upper body, even though most of the stuff we do is open chain, most of it. There's nothing wrong with doing closed chain, and there's nothing wrong with doing some open chain exercises for the lower body either. But for the most part, if you really want to train primally, was primal man sitting down doing a hamstring curl machine?
Yeah.
No.
Oh.
No. And there's ways that you could do something way, way more better than that with a Swiss ball that'll, put a hamstring that's 10 times, 20 times more functional than doing any kind of hamstring curl machine, if you will. And understanding the eccentric and concentric, phases. We've talked about this before, how you've got this two sides to your muscles. It's not just one way. You don't just push. There's this eccentric, concentric. There's this feed in, feed out. All those things are really important. And in all reality, if you were to go in the average gym and look, most people are talking, they're not paying attention. And I'm not, this is just, to me, this is like a big deficit in the fitness industry. People don't really come in and pay attention. We are qualified people, right? We come in, people pay us. We owe them to honor their time. And we need to honor their time as they're honoring ours with their time and their money. So, I don't want to be messing around with my clients when they come in. I don't want to be freestyling, just going through a bunch of stuff. I've done that before. One of my clients I've had for 20 years, it's like, okay, I didn't really write anything down for today, but I know what we need to work on. Last week we did this. This week we want to try to get into this because I want to try to keep her active in her patterns. That's just so critical to her. So, but having that plan is important, but also being able to alter that plan if you have to. And that takes knowing your clients and knowing that they're going to be willing to focus well. And if you're not focusing, you're cheating yourself. If you're talking, you're not breathing, you're not thinking about what's going on. And if you're not able to, as a trainer or a coach or whatever you want to call yourself, if you're not able to transfer that to people, I think we really need to learn how to be able to do that. But if we look out in this world, a lot of people are simply not willing to go there. Okay, whether it's the individual, whether it's the trainer, because we get complacent. I myself have been in that position many, many times. I'm understanding that do your work, buddy. Even though I'm older and moving more out and doing different things now, I'm not trying to get it all anymore. I don't need to. I don't want to, But what I am going to do is I want to really, really do well with what's in front of me. And that's what really matters to me. It's not like how much I can get. It's like, what do you have is what's important, not what I'm going to get. What do I have in front of me? So, there's some, I know it's rather tangential and more of a stream of consciousness as we're speaking here, but, there's some deeply important things if you really, really want to grasp health, whole health. And most people are just wanting to I'm going to go in and work with my trainer because it's what we should do today, right? It's what society tells us we should go do this, or we should go do CrossFit, or we should go do yoga, or we should look like this, or we should look like that. We've been programmed from birth for that stuff. So being able to get away from that and understand who you truly are is what I'm trying to find in people and find in myself. And if you're honest with yourself, and if you're honest with the people you're working with, they're going to help. You're going to help guide them to find out who they really are. And you are going to find out who you really are with them too. It works both ways.
Yeah, my favorite thing is when a client thinks they can't do something and then they do it, or just can't get past parallel on the squat for whatever reason, and then they start squatting past parallel. And it's like, you're squatting past parallel now. And they're like, oh, wow. And it's such a... or hitting a certain weight on the shoulder, whatever, press or whatever. And to just see people go from, yeah, I can't do that, to, I just did that. And it's so cool to see their surprise. And you talk about the paying attention and the trainers. And it's like every other profession, there's really good ones, and there's ones that are, the opposite end of the spectrum. And I don't like talking bad about anyone, and I won't do that publicly, of course, on the podcast. But you can see at these different gyms that I've been to over the years, and what you have, it's like they're just kind of winging it every time, where they have, they're not writing anything down. They're not. They're just like this random selection of stuff, and like what Coach Dan John calls random acts of variety. Which,
I like that.
Yeah, and it's like, what are you doing? And so, like with like my clients, I'll have like most of their workout is like set in stone. I know what they're going to do next time. I know the weights. I know the sets. I know, and then the time after that, I know that too. Unless something else comes up, knee hurts, something. But sometimes at the end of it, it's like, okay, are we going to do like medicine ball sit-ups where we throw it back and forth? Or are you going to do it like you're throwing it against the wall when you're standing by yourself? So like something like that, I might like wing it a little bit and just decide at the moment. But yeah, the consciousness of the trainers and what you get, and I think a lot of probably falls into like what we were talking about with the yoga too, is these people like don't know what they don't know, so they'll think that because someone has that they're popular or that they have a degree that they really know what they're doing. But I've met people that were more as far as I know, you don't have a degree in exercise, but I would recommend you for sure. And there's people that I do know that have degrees and that I've known over the years. Like one of them that I won't say the name, but I worked with the same gym. This was when I first started in like 1999. But she had like a master's degree in like fitness and didn't even know how to put a program together. Had no real functional knowledge. She could probably beat me on the test. She could probably like maybe do better on the anatomy test or do better on the something, like gas exchange stuff that I might start getting confused but it's like as far as like putting a program together, she was asking the owner how to put programs together, and it was like, see, it's like just, it's really sad, and you can't really tell, I guess, until you don't know what you don't know. And so I know we've kind of talked about that before. So without getting into like naming names or anything, like how do you go about like doing your doing something that is high level when like maybe what you see around you, maybe not like the gym that you're working at now, but like how do you like how do you like tell people that what you're doing is at this level, and they're seeing someone else that may be more popular that's not so good? I don't know if I'm phrasing that question very well, but
I think I see what you're getting at. It's like it's what people there's fear and there's resistance to change. There's fear and resistance to the unfamiliar often. And if people say they've been working with a trainer that they're real comfortable, they're real familiar with, and blah blah blah, and they may feel that they don't need to they don't need to go any further. They don't need to be with anybody else. They're good to go. And that to me is like, yeah, that's more of, yeah, I did what I had to do today instead of I do this. This exercise a sentence or should bring like joy to people? It should. It shouldn't be a sentence. It shouldn't be hurting us. It shouldn't be torture. Even though there's nothing wrong with going really intensely in exercise. Nothing wrong with it. I love the intensity. When I feel like I got it on the days I got it, I love the intensity of challenging ourselves. And I think you really like that too. Otherwise you wouldn't be a strong force trainer, because that's pretty challenging stuff right there. Pavel's done some incredibly good work. In fact, the CHEK Institute, endorses him and has adapted his kettlebell program and asked him to help them design a program that we as practitioners have available to us now. So, there's a lot to be said for that. But, just understanding that we get complacent, man. We get really, really complacent. We think we're in the know. And often, I have felt like, why aren't people seeing? A lot of times that I have perceived that sometimes. This could be totally wrong, because you can't get in people's heads. You don't really know what people are thinking about. But the majority of people I see that work with others, they would probably not fit with me very well at all. The reason being is because I would demand things from them in a different way than they're used to being asked. So probably wouldn't be a very good fit for them. And that's okay, man. That's all right. You can't be the guru and expect everybody to worship you. You just can't. And that's part of letting go of our own egos too. Like, I need to be recognized. I want to be esteemed. And that was big for me when I first started as a trainer. Like, oh man, I'm getting all this recognition. Anymore, it's like, dude, I get in my own way. The more I seek us being recognized and esteemed and validated, the more I get in my own way. The more I can let go of that. And that's not easy to do because we got this ego we carry around with us, It's not easy to do, but it's freeing. The more I don't really give a shit what people think of me. Excuse me. I don't really care what people think about me. I really don't. But I want to try to reflect something that's really, really good. They can think what they will, but I want to reflect something really, really good. And that's like, I want to be a giver in this world that is not fair. It's not equal. It's not just. It's not righteous. It's not fair. But I want to be somebody that I don't want to expect that. But I want to be someone that doesn't cease to give it to people. That's how we make a difference.
Yeah, it can be frustrating for me to see. I've had clients, no trainer has like 100% retention rate. It just doesn't happen if you've been in it for any length of time. But like trainers or clients maybe not stick around, and then you see what they're doing somewhere else, and it's like, if you would have stuck with me, you'd be so much farther ahead. And I know that because the results don't lie, and it's not like I invented all of this stuff. I mean, like you said, I'm certified by Strong First, so I use that method for a lot. And then, like you mentioned, animal movements into hand balancing, which I got from combining different things. But it is not going to be everything to everyone, and to see, there's, these trainers that are not putting in what and it just a little bit of tweaking could, they just go from one machine to the next, and they're just putting the pin in, and then they're carrying their clipboard around, and it can be tough to see that. But yeah, it's I got just something we have to keep doing what we're doing, and some people will get it and some people won't, and just got to keep on.
You have to be an emissary, man. You're really kind of a warrior for peace and the truth, really, when it comes right down to it. That's what it's really all about, in a way. You want to try to give people really truthful information. That's it. You want to try to coach them for it. You're not going to do it for them. You're trying to be honest about that. It's really up to them more than anything. And just to go back quickly to something you mentioned about the programs, I see a lot of people writing programs for people, and they have stuff written up, but it's the same. They can do this, they do that. It's not really considered what they're going to do in a way that's periodized, if you will. Okay, like a plan, if you will. It's like they're going to come in twice a week. We're going to hop around, do this and do that because they know they can do that. And they got the same programs. I don't really use the same programs. Maybe redundant. I may have the people do the same thing, but I try not to just refer back to another program. And I've walked in when I haven't had anything written up. And that is unprofessional, pure and simple. That said, it's really important that we just don't get into these cookie cutter modes. And if I have someone that comes in and I'm going to take them through these 5 machines every single time, I'm not really doing them any favors, because that I know they're going to do that. Well, I don't have to even think about that. I don't even have to think about that. So that's really not doing them any favors either. So you get people conditioned to do work that really is not very intense, that really doesn't really going to benefit their balance or their strength in any real ways. But you spend the time doing that anyway. And it's a little bit of a cop-out. And I don't mean to sound like I'm putting people down. People simply don't see it as that. They simply do not see it as that. Out of the place I work out of, every single trainer in there, except for me, uses the machines in some way, shape, or form. And some of them are really just anatomically incorrect, period. And they're just not designed for correct anatomical function. And every single one of them. And I have a lot of respect for what a lot of these people have done and what I've learned from them. I'm not trying to be an exercise snob. When I've walked in this gym I've worked in for almost 10 years now, I've learned a lot from watching. And That's not something I never thought of, and it's been great. But I want to be open to that. I want to be really, really open to that. So, if you're not, and, I have virtually no status. Zero status. I have plenty of status. You know what I'm saying? In my heart, before God, if you will, I have plenty of status. I'm graced, man. But I don't have any status in that place. I don't really care. It doesn't matter. Because that's not what matters. What matters is what's in front of me. And so this is where I happen to be. So I can what do I need to do? I need to get out of that place. Well, if you go into a place similar to it, you're probably going to see about the same thing, right? So does it always mean going into a new locale or whatever is going to make everything better for you? No, it's this is what's in front of you right now. And you deal with it. And I've gotten better with being more humble and being more courteous and learning how to be a washer of feet in the gym. I'm a janitor at the gym I work at too. I clean the toilets and the showers and all that other stuff. And I'm going to be 63 years old pretty soon. So, and I don't mind doing it because I can make it something holy.
Yeah, that reminds me of you know who Ram Dass is, right?
Yes.
Something just came up on my Facebook the other day that I posted. I've probably posted it a bunch of times, but how he talks about how as your consciousness starts to change, you might have to change professions, or you can do that profession that you're still in at a higher state of consciousness, so you can just start to see what you're doing. Like, oh, you're cleaning toilets. Oh my gosh, you must be desperate. No, I'm not. Actually, I have enough money. I don't have to do that. I don't have to work at all, which is the position that you're in.
Well, to some degree. I'm semi-retired. I really, I need to work some. But, I
was just trying to put that statement into perspective for the listener.
Thank you.
So it's like, you're just this different way of looking at it. Like, it saves you it helps knock out your gym fees. It helps knock out your, and, $20 is $20, right? So even though, it's, I was just, like I said, just trying to put that into perspective. Like so people can actually get what you're saying by that, which I picked up on, and just having this view of can't really control what other people do. You can learn from them, and it may be like oh, that's why he's using that machine. This person has this injury, and I didn't know. Now it all makes sense. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's and I've done that too. I can look at what other people are doing, and I respect a lot of the trainers that work at my gym. There's not really a lot of trainers there, but one of them has been on the show, JP. He's a yoga teacher also and a fitness trainer. There's another one coming on. I think next weekend we're recording. There's another one coming on. So it's there's some good stuff, and they're different than me. So it's not like I think or you think that everybody needs to be doing these exercises just like we're teaching them, and or these programs the way we're programming them. But there is a lack of the high level, this complacency. There's this, people were stuck in the way personal training was 20 years ago or something, and it's there's this new consciousness, to use the word again. It's that it might be an overused word, but I'm trying to make it even more used in a way. That's why the show is called Fitness and Consciousness. Mm-hmm. We're here to talk about what it means in different ways. So is there something that's that you've found out about recently that you're wanting to dive into, something that you're
That's a really, really good question. Well, there's so many things out there, and I think it's important that if depending on where we're at as a trainer or a coach, if you will, whatever you call yourself, is that we're where are we going? What is our focus? What's our demographic that we work with? So that can dictate to us about what we're doing to some degree. But could you rephrase that question again to me, please, so I can I'm clear on
what new things are you looking into, or maybe old things that you're re-looking into?
Well, that's an excellent point right there, because the familiar, you think you got it mastered often, but you can always get more out of something, so that's important. But I really, as far as new ventures go, there's training I'm understanding. You brought my attention to the guy that created the BOSA ball, Dave Weck.
Oh, yeah.
And how he's getting these incredible results with people that are already very athletic and at the top of their game, already increasing their speed very, very quickly. So there's new things coming in all the time. I have this book, it's called The Genius of Flexibility, and talking about how these resisting, and it's the principles of yoga really about resistance and pushing. There again, we're coming to the earth thing where you got to push against the earth. The more we resist, not in our hearts or our minds, but the more we push, the more it releases. So just hanging into a stretch is not necessarily something, but learning how to resist. It's kind of like active isolated stretching. It's kind of like some of the Iyengar yoga principles, but there's a lot of validity to it because it changes and you get results very quickly instead of just hanging out in some static type of stretch. So exploring things of that nature. I love the kettlebell work. I love playing with kettlebells. Even though I'm not that great with them, I can do get-ups pretty good, swings. Some of the moves that you showed me are very, very challenging for me to do, some of the ones you've created. But, I like challenging myself with new stuff, like doing monkey bar stuff. I never did that. I was never able to do, go hand over hand on monkey bars when I was a kid. I was never strong enough. I never even thought about doing it until they put a ladder on the ceiling. And then I saw you do it, I wonder if I could do that. Well, I could. It's like, oh, wow, that's kind of fun to throw in once in a while. I never flipped tires or jumped up on boxes or, I was a construction worker for 25, almost 30 years, and I did every type of imaginable move you can swing at sledgehammers, running every kind of tool, jackhammers, lifting heavy loads. I was a fence builder, and we built commercial industrial fence, and it was heavy work. And I did it for 25 years, and plus I trained as a triathlete for 20 years within the parameters of all that, and it kind of trashed me, honestly. I thought I was invincible, but it kind of trashed me, and I paid for it and learned how to correct things, and I'm still learning.
I think that's a good segue into the next subject, which I wasn't really thinking about until you just said it. So what's wrong with being a triathlete? What did you mean by what you just said? Why was it trashing you?
There's nothing wrong with being a triathlete. There's nothing wrong with being a marathoner. There's just a lot of pattern overload that goes on in sports, and it creates injury. I've injured myself not traumatically. All of a sudden, something just went because of pattern overload. In other words, all I do is run. I don't take care of myself in any other way. I'm so hamstrung tight, but I gotta insist on keep running instead of doing variable movements, learning how to take care of yourself, blah, blah, blah. Doing too much cardio is damaging to the system. I have damaged my system from doing way too much cardiovascular work. Once you get beyond about an hour of cardiovascular work, your heart starts swelling because it's getting inflamed and it scars it. Study done on 100 elite marathoners. All of them had scarring in their heart. I have it in my heart from all the excessive cardio that I did. And I got overheated so many times, dehydrated. You added up. I was a construction worker. My scenario was slightly different probably than a lot of people, maybe significantly different. I had a lot more stuff going on physically than a lot of people had. Like your weekend triathlete, I was a weekend triathlete, wasn't likely a construction worker. They were more like somebody that was more upper middle class that could afford to do the sport. I was just a basic construction worker. Had enough to be able to pay for things and what have you, but doing way too much trashed me, man. There's nothing wrong with it, but you have to make sense out of your training. I see people running that I've known for years, and they should not be running anymore. And they insist on doing it because it's their ego and their habit. They cannot let go of it. And they could do something so much far better, far more better for their body and their spirit entirely, instead of being driven to go do this and go do this. And that was part of what triathlon was for me. I was so driven by it. And I was very passionate about it. It started me. It brought me into my physical person. It was good. I don't have any interest in it anymore. Some of the things I can't cycle anymore because of what happened to me from sitting on a bicycle seat and grinding away in the aero position on the handlebars. And it's happened to a lot of men. And cycling's over for me because of that. So I would caution you, be careful, guys and girls. Make sure you're taking care of yourself down there and you're getting the right equipment, because you can mess yourself up severely down there. And I did, and I paid for it. So that was the whole thing that I went through last year of huge suffering. So no man or woman should go through what I went through. I would not put that curse on anybody. That said, there's nothing wrong with any of that type of stuff, but you have to make sense out of it. If you're going to be a marathoner, you can't go run out there to run 2 miles and expect to do it. But man, I'm just not, so much cardio is just not that great for you, I understand where people go with that stuff. I'm not saying don't do it. Man, I understand if you're going to go out there and you're going to be a triathlete, you got to go out there and put some time into the saddle. You got to put some time in there on the road. You got to put some time in the pool. There's other things you can be putting some time into that are going to be very, very beneficial and helpful to you. Do them, like strength training, mobility training, foam rolling. I mean, the list can go on and on and on and on. Good chiropractic care. Learn how to care for yourself. Learn how to be smart in your training. There's a lot more information available today on how to be smarter with our training too. I still see people going out there and holding on to the same things over and over again. I've recognized faces from racing from back in the 80s that I see today. I'll see people, familiar faces, like at the pool once in a while. Like, well, I've seen that guy out in the triathlons for years. Don't even recognize me. Okay, I was at the pool a while ago, and this guy that I've recognized for years as a triathlete came in. And he swam, and I was in the locker room, and I was talking to somebody, and I was relating to him my experience of what happened to me with cycling. And this guy's sitting there, and I knew he was a triathlete. I didn't think about it, but he was sitting there, and he's like, he pipes up, you mean cycling can harm you in that way? And this is somebody that's doing it for 20 plus years and doesn't even know that cycling can be potentially damaging to you if you're not taking care of yourself. It's kind of mind-boggling, really. So what I'm saying is that mindfulness is really important. We've been going back to that again in almost everything that we do. And most of us, let's face it, our mind, about 90% of the population, I'm not saying this in a way, it's the fact is immersed in technology and is not paying attention, particularly in America. And there's a guy named Earl Nightingale. He was like a motivational speaker. 40 years ago, he put these little I've heard these cassette tapes from a friend of mine's father years ago. You can go to the Nightingale Conant Foundation online. It's there today, and listen to Earl's stuff online now. But I had these old cassette tapes that my friend's dad had from Earl Nightingale, talking about inspirational stuff, how to wake up, how, like, man, you dig that clog of stone, dirty stone out of the ground, you polish it, you make it a diamond. And he said, don't be a sleepwalker in this world, because 95% of the people are sleepwalking in this world. 40 years ago, he was talking about this stuff. His story is an amazing story if you look up Earl Nightingale and the Nightingale Conant Foundation. He's an amazing inspirational speaker, deeply spiritual man. And he spoke into real truth. It's like, wake up. Basically, he's saying, do your work. Go after your gifts. They're waiting for you out there. Don't play yourself as a victim. You're not. Anybody can do great things, no matter what their circumstances are. Even if they're the farmer in the deepest Siberia somewhere, you can still do good things. We may not think of it in that way, but if we do our work, we provide for our family. If it's something as simple as that, and we take heart and soul into that, because we love to try to provide, because that's our duty morally and spiritually. And we feel that consciously because that's who we are. It's not because anybody told us that. It's because we understand that consciously, because innately that's who we are as human beings. And most of us are not attentive to that. I certainly was not. And I'm only beginning to understand what that really means. And boy, is it ever, it's freeing. It's really freeing.
Yeah, I really like what you said there. That makes a lot of sense. And so I think that's a good place to start wrapping it up here. Do you have any closing thoughts? And how can someone get a hold of you if they want training?
Well, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge you and thank you for the opportunity that you've allowed me to come and be a part of. I really appreciate being a part of stuff like this, and I can only hope that you and others like you continue to bring the truth out to people, the truth in exercise, whatever it may be. And as far as how people can get a hold of me, you can get a hold of me at area code 317-259-7880 in Indianapolis, Indiana. You can email me at samblandina@gmail.com.
Thanks again for being on the show, and we will certainly do it again. We've had many, many very long conversations, and that just open up the doors for even more. So thanks again. Thanks for listening to Fitness and Consciousness. If you want to get a hold of me about the show, you can do so at fitnessandconsciousness@gmail.com.